Good morning. It's lovely to be back with you again. As we step further into the Easter season, the theme of dying to new life is resonating with me. In today's gospel, Jesus appears to the disciples, not once, but twice. He bestows on them the Holy Spirit and says, "As the Father has sent me, so I send you." From then on, they go out, near and far, spreading the word of his love and mercy. They are changed. A new birth, a new chapter in their lives begins. This invites us into a kind of deeper knowing that Jesus triumphed over his physical death and holy resurrection. To many Christians, including the very earliest witnesses to the resurrection, the Paschal journey's meaning lies in something far deeper than that first century event. Jesus' core conviction was and is, as our presiding Bishop Michael Curry reminds us over and over, that love is stronger than death. The laying down of self leads not to death, but life. We aren't limited by celebrating Jesus' experience of his human death and divine resurrection. No, Easter is about much more than this. It's not even limited to our own physical death and hope of an afterlife with Jesus. The dying and being resurrected serves as an archetype for all our personal experiences of dying and rising to new life. Instances of seeing with new eyes. My sense of these is that they often show up in moments of crisis and loss. Something happens on our journey that shakes us to the core. Often it's a loss of some kind. The death of a loved one, a serious diagnosis or condition, an injury like a broken hip, a door closed on a hoped-for opportunity, or the loss of a relationship. God is always in the midst of our lives, no matter what is happening. We are not alone. I had one of these epiphanies following my recent hip fracture and surgery. I looked up the definition of epiphany. Here's one which resonated with my experience. An epiphany is a moment of sudden or great revelation that changes you in some way. I had my epiphany during the second week I was home from the hospital. I was lying on the window seat in our great room by the cathedral window. I spent most of my days there, napping, watching the great variety of birds showing up for spring, listening to their chatter and the wind in the trees. Basically, just chilling out. One morning, suddenly, unexpectedly, I felt a tremendous lightening of my spirit. This was a specific feeling. It was one of falling away of all the stresses and suffering I had been dealing with. And truth be told, replaying in my head over and over for the whole past year. In less than a moment, they all fell away. I felt lighter than ever, in a whole new place, in my mind, in my heart, in my spirit. I'm convinced this was God's healing grace. It's easy to say, let go and let God, isn't it? It's much harder to actually do it. I don't think we can do it by ourselves. I think the Holy One is the doer, the vehicle of these epiphanies. Gratitude. Gratitude. I was 100 pounds lighter in a moment. I then asked myself, what's really important? What gives me life? The second part of the revelation was my own part in owning it. All that suffering over the past year was self-imposed. That isn't to say that our griefs are self-imposed. They aren't. In this instant, though, my continued suffering was self-imposed. I could have just accepted the realities of what was playing out in my life and moved on gracefully. But no, I kept revisiting them and replaying them in my head. Looking back, I was fertilizing my own toxic garden. And who was that hurting? Only myself. Bummer. It didn't change any of the circumstances or the relationships that had changed. It did, however, keep my mind occupied with my own pain. And that's the consequence of self-imposed suffering. It distracts you from the things that give you life, the things God is calling you to do. I came across a Parker Palmer quote which fits these times of struggle. He reminds us that before the spring blossoms, we wade through the muck and the mud. He says the word humus, that decayed vegetable matter that feeds the roots of the plants, comes from the same root word that gives rise to the word humility. Humility. The mucky parts of our lives often create fertile soil in which something new can grow. Death and resurrection. Dying to the dark parts of our lives to make room for God to give us new life, seeing with new eyes. In closing, in the spirit of Midrash, we could add to the last sentence of today's Gospel of John. It might go like this, that through beloving Jesus, you may have new life in his name. Lord, help us to be open to the epiphanies you send us and learn to follow you more closely by living and loving with new eyes. Amen.